Shadows, the horror movie heroes. By Clouds. My Head in the Clouds Not Coming Down. Read by Oakshadow 5. Chapter 4. Potential. Summary. Great theory, poor execution. It felt like Kachan was getting worse. Maybe Izuku was imagining it, but ever since he gotten captured by the sludge villain, Kachan was about twice as mean as he had been. He must be compensating for being caught as the victim and trying to regain either a sense of control or a sense of power. But in the end, it didn't matter what had led to the change. It just mattered that Izuku stayed out of his attack radius as much as humanly possible. That wasn't an option during class, unfortunately, especially since most of his teachers would turn a blind eye to Izuku getting tripped, burned, or hurt if it meant that Kachan wouldn't interrupt class. But after class was when the worst beatings happened anyway, so if he could just stay out of sight for long enough for Kachan to leave, then Izuku could go hang out with Shinzo at the park. He just had to stay out of sight. Izuku looked around for somewhere to hide. Inside a locker would be fine if he had a guarantee that he could get out. But if the locker latched and he got trapped, then it would defeat the whole purpose of hiding in the first place. Empty classrooms weren't a safe bet, because Kachan would send his lackeys to check those, and if he tried going to a teacher, it would just make things worse. If only there was some way to give himself an advantage and take the high ground. Izuku almost stopped in his tracks as it hit him. Take the high ground. Sure, Katsuki could easily reach him with his explosions, but that was only if he thought to look up. Izuku sped up and skidded around the corner, making a beeline for the trophy case. Kachan had won pretty much every award the school offered, so his name and face were featured multiple times. Well, Izuku may as well not be a student. That didn't matter though. What mattered was that the case didn't go all the way to the ceiling. There was about a foot of space on top with a little decorative lip along the edge of the case that should be enough to mostly hide him if he laid down completely flat. Izuku grabbed a chair from the empty classroom and used it to try and scramble up the side of the case, accidentally kicking it aside as he did. It took all of his strength to get up on top of it, but he finally managed it with a grunt. It was hard to catch his breath with all the dust, so he covered his mouth and did his best to muffle how hard he was panting. This entire plan would be for nothing if Kachan heard him and found his hiding place. It was only a few seconds after Izuku had settled in that Kachan and a couple of their other classmates ran at the corner. Kachan had a murderous expression on his face as he looked down the hallway in both directions. "You extra split up and find that damn nerd! I'm gonna take a look around here!" His lackeys nodded and one took off in either direction while Kachan started looking around. He peeked his head in each of the other classrooms, and Izuku had to fight off disappointment when he didn't look at any of them for more than a few seconds. Then Kachan saw the chair on the floor and his eyes narrowed. Izuku couldn't help himself as he started trembling. If Kachan found him, was there anything he could even do? If he was just stronger, then he could have gotten up quicker and not had to use the chair. He should have left any evidence that Kachan could use to find him. Hiding had seemed like the perfect plan at the time, but if it didn't work, then it would just make everything worse. He needed to get better at thinking ahead and strategizing for every possibility, not just the one he hoped would happen. Stupid dust. If he was going to be hiding in places like this frequently, he'd need to start carrying around a mask. Kachan was getting closer, and Izuku clamped his hands over his mouth again as he felt a sneeze coming on. He hated this. He hated being so terrified. And as much as he hated it, what made it even worse was that Kachan didn't even know what it was like. With the exception of the sludge villain, he'd never been the victim. He didn't know what it was like to live in fear like Izuku did. His mind was racing through all the research he'd done since meeting Shinzo, and Izuku knew that there were 1.5 million strategies that he could use, but if he tried them and failed, that would just make Kachan even more angry than he was right now. Plus, there was the fact that Izuku was pretty sure that Kachan's fight-or-flight response was mostly geared toward fight, which meant that a fake-out strategy wasn't going to work here, like it did with the sludge villain. What was he supposed to do? Kachan's eyes slid from the chair to the trophy case to Izuku on top. He gulped. Too late. "There you are, Deku!" Kachan smirked. "Found you!" Kyoka wasn't quite sure what to think of her new teacher. Dad was always so gung-ho about taking advantage of new opportunities and never saying no to an adventure. But he was also impulsive and had a habit of not thinking things through all the way. So yeah, Dad saw absolutely nothing sketchy about some guy who supposedly worked for All Might offering to train her. But Kyoka was obviously picking up more than a few red flags that merited bringing pepper spray along to her first training session. If Toshinori Yagi hadn't been listed as an employee on All Might's website, she wouldn't have even shown up at all. But a little extra training from someone who actually knew the hero industry would be extremely valuable. So, even though she was still pretty sure he was lying about something, she had decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. For now. The Goba Municipal Beach Park. When Yagi had told her the meeting place, she'd been expecting more. Well, just more. The park, if you could even call it that, was so disused that people had started using it as a public dump site, and if there had ever been a playground anywhere around here, it had long since been buried beneath literal mountains of trash. Yagi, of course, blended right in, so it took her a minute to realize that he'd beaten her there and was already standing on the boardwalk, looking out over the ocean. Kyoka wrinkled her nose and winced at every minuscule creak the wood made as she started picking her way to him. No offense, but this perfect training ground you picked is kind of a mess. Yagi jumped and gave her a sheepish smile. Oh, young Jiro, I, didn't see you there. Jiro gave him a skeptical look. So, are we gonna train, or what? Yes, of course. Yagi snapped into action and started making his way back to the beach with much less care than she had taken, most likely because he couldn't hear every concerning creak the wood made as they put weight on it. But they somehow managed to reach the sand without the boardwalk collapsing underneath them. Kyoka breathed a sigh of relief. This was definitely turning out to be an adventure. So, young Jiro, Yagi began, leading her through the piles of trash. I must admit that I haven't been completely honest with you. His form started to shift, and Kyoka cursed under her breath and grabbed the can of pepper spray in her pocket. Go on an adventure, Dad said. It'll be a great opportunity, he said. Kyoka swore to God, if she got murdered, she was going to haunt her father for the rest of his miserable life. She had no idea what kind of quirk this guy had, but from the shift in size, it was most likely some kind of monster quirk. She wasn't equipped to fight that. What could she do? Yagi had already lured her out of sight of the street, but they were still close enough that if she pepper sprayed him and bolted, she might just be able to get away before he recovered. She braced her feet, and as soon as the smoke had cleared enough for her to tell where the creature's eyes were, she fired. Bullseye. The smoke surrounding Yagi finished clearing, and Kyoka's eyes widened as she realized just who exactly she had just pepper sprayed right in the eyes, right as he let out a strangled cry and collapsed back into a skeletal form with a puff of steam. All Might? Yes. All Might coughed up a small amount of blood, making Kyoka feel even worse. Well, I knew you were, strong enough for my quirk. Where's my phone? Here, call recovery girl. Jiro was shaken as she grabbed his phone out of his hand and searched through the contacts. Thankfully, there weren't that many, and recovery girl was already near the top of his recent calls. Hello? I think I might have just attacked the #1 hero. Sorry? Hitoshi was trying really hard to not feel betrayed. After going over to Midoriya's house, he thought that they were at least partners, if not friends, but here he was, at the meeting place, alone. Midoriya really didn't strike him as the type of guy to be late, so at this point, it was probably safe to assume that he wasn't showing up at all. Maybe he'd wanted to show up and his mom just hadn't let him? That was probably just wishful thinking. It would have been nice if Midoriya still wanted to hang out with him, but he'd probably come to his senses and realize that the whole using fear as a weapon and being associated with someone with a villain's quirk was kind of a bad idea in the first place. Even if it ended up working, it was still a long shot. Hitoshi sighed and jumped off the swing he'd been sitting on. He might as well go home and do his homework. He needed to at least make sure he could pass the Gen Ed exam once it was time to apply to UA. He shouldn't have gotten his hopes up. Shinzo! Midoriya's voice made him stop on his tracks. Sorry I'm late. I, got held up, but I'm here now. Hitoshi looked Midoriya up and down. He was slightly favoring one ankle, and his uniform was singed and torn in several places. Plus, Hitoshi was fairly certain that those were bandages peeking out from his sleeves.
Held up by who? Muggers?
No, Midori rubbed the back of his neck. Just some bullies. I really wish I could just make them go away. I mean, I know how, right? But other study we've done is just in theory. I've never really had a chance to practice being scary, you know?
No, and I've only ever practiced being less scary.
Hitoshi nodded in understanding.
So, what are we gonna do about that?
There's gotta be some way for us to practice. Midori had started muttering to himself, so Hitachi just let him talk and tried to catch as much as possible. There are haunted houses, but while those might be helpful, they probably won't hire kids our age. Wait, aren't there companies that provide civilians for rescue simulations and stuff for heroes in training? I wonder if there's opportunities like that for fake villains.
If there is, that'll probably be the best.
Hitoshi cut in.
I mean, the point is to beat the villains at their own game, right? So, pretending to be villains would probably be a pretty effective way to practice.
Midoriya smiled and put out his phone. Okay, let's start there. We'll probably need a lot more physical training too. And maybe parkour? It seems like it'll be really useful to be able to beat villains in mobility. And, I kinda tried hiding on top of a display case and rolled my ankle jumping down. Hitoshi raised an eyebrow.
Was this before or after you got beat up?
Midoriya grimaced. Before. And that reminds me, we should probably learn to fight.
Yeah.
Hitoshi nodded.
Yeah, we should probably get on that.
Hitoshi and Izuku are gonna join as villains in a training exercise. I'm so excited for the next chapters. Shadows is so fun. But anyways guys, I hope you all enjoyed chapter 4 of Shadows, the horror movie heroes, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!